Welcome back to my Mission Impossible series, and today I'm talking about the second film in the series, which is very much so the black sheep of the series. It goes in a different direction, and some people have problems with that, and I'll get into my opinion in a second. In this film, Ethan Hunt and the rest of his IMF team are sent to stop a rogue agent from releasing a genetically modified disease. Ever since I announced that I was going to be talking about Mission Impossible, ever since I mentioned that Mission Impossible Dead Reckoning Part 1 was my most anticipated film of the year, I always had in mind that this movie was going to be interesting. I pretty much, out of this film, expected what I got out of Scream 3. Scream 3 is the only film in the Scream franchise that I don't love. But I still liked that film to a certain degree, and it's that franchise still qualifies, at least for me, as a franchise that doesn't have a bad movie. It doesn't have a movie that I gave a negative grade. And I expected the same thing out of this movie. Things didn't quite go as well as I thought they would, but there are still some positives in this movie, and I'll talk about those first. There's a plot thread where Ethan has to recruit this thief, Naya, onto his team. And they have sort of this back and forth that's fun, it's kind of flirty. A bit of chemistry between Tom Cruise and this actress, and some of the scenes between them are entertaining because of that. And more towards the back half of the movie, this film still uses some elements of the first. It utilizes some espionage type sequences where Ethan has to do these weird stunts and get into different places. There's a scene where he has to jump off a helicopter and drop into this building. That all has to be within 40 seconds. And that scene was creative. It does have a good bit of tension. And when you get to the shootouts, and especially like the end chase, it's really entertaining. Like John Woo knows how to direct an action film, and it's all directed in a way where you can see what's happening, and there's practical stunts and just some pretty great shots of action. Towards the back half of the movie, this film gets really exciting, and I mentioned in the first review that what I liked about that movie is that it was more simple tension, more simple spy thriller stuff. But this film was the first that actually pushed it more into high-octane action. There were parts of it that I certainly thought it worked. The third act happens, and I'm like, wow, where was this movie the rest of the runtime? And I'll get into those other things in a minute. The final shootout in this film is actually pretty awesome, where Ethan is held at gunpoint, but then he sees a gun in the sand, and then he kicks up the sand and the gun comes up and he grabs it and he's able to shoot this person and avoid that person shooting at him. That was such a well-crafted shot, such a memorable sequence to end this film on. I would say that as a whole, though, this movie works better as a John Woo action film than it does as Mission Impossible. I wanted to find some positives, and there are some things that I like about this film. Like I said, the action, some of the scenes with the characters are still entertaining. The reality is that I don't like this movie, and I can guarantee that it's going to end up being the only film in the franchise that I don't like. This film is very much so more rock and roll. There's some generic action music in this, which is already just kind of What makes it worse, and for me at least, is that they take the theme from Mission Impossible, which was already good. It worked. It didn't need fixing. And they made it more rock and roll. And it didn't really work for me. I didn't like it. I was thinking, okay, no, bring the score back. The other movies that follow the original, they change the score. It doesn't stay the same, but this film, it changes it to rock and roll, and just to the point where it loses the heart of Mission Impossible, at least for me. This film goes so much into that rock and roll side that there's actually a scene where Ethan is climbing this mountain. Very intense scene where he's not using any gear, and I think it was Tom Cruise actually doing this stunt, which is insane. That man is crazy. He's doing it for our entertainment, so it's okay. But anyway, he's climbing this mountain. What could work is just a silent scene, just the wind of this high altitude. But no, we have to have this music that doesn't fit with the scene.
Hey, mister, see that sister? Don't you let that fail you. Sticks and stones may break your bones. The man who looks could kill you.
Ethan and Naya, their banter is kind of fun, the way they kind of go at each other, but you don't really buy a romance out of these characters. There's really nothing that inherently interesting about the character of Naya. All that we really have about her was that she was the ex-girlfriend of our main villain, and even that plot thread with those characters isn't explored too much. This film attempts for emotional scenes between her and Ethan, and I just didn't feel it. Speaking about the fact that this is more going against what Mission Impossible was set up to be, the 40-second drop was a very creative sequence, but this film, it doesn't really have any other like Mission Impossible-esque sequence that stands out. It doesn't have anything that holds a candle to the silent room sequence in the first one. I respect that they went in a different direction. It didn't work, but I do respect that choice to a certain degree. So okay, at least there can be some really good action, some really fast-paced stuff throughout the whole film. Not really. There's a car thing at the beginning between Ethan and Naya that's kind of dumb. They're just kind of racing at each other, and it's more of their flirty back and forth, but they almost like kill each other. And from that point until you're at an hour and 16 minutes, there's really no action. It's just feeding you this plot that's very familiar. There's really nothing that intriguing about it. There's actually a scene where the villain is talking to one of his associates, figuring out a deal where he wants this guy's stocks. But they're having this whole conversation, and I remember actually just leaving to get something during that scene. It was boring, honestly. Which, speaking of that villain, Sean Ambrose, I believe his name was. Character, not the actor. He kind of sucks. He might just be the worst villain of the franchise. It's just this familiar, like, boyfriend storyline where I guess he was kind of controlling, and then now he's a dick. Been there, done that. It's nothing that interesting. He gives an alright performance, I guess, that really doesn't have any nuance, which is actually disappointing for this film because Ethan and him are actually kind of alike. That they think the same, but they have different methods of how to do stuff. And then I guess that's how he decided to leave IMF and like become kind of like a terrorist. It could have been an interesting dynamic between these characters, but it needed more time. They don't actually come face to face until an hour and 20 minutes into the movie. All that time, this boring stuff, they could have had that dynamic and it could have enhanced some of the story elements. That whole laundry list of negatives just to say that this is the worst of this franchise. It's not what I come to Mission Impossible for. It's not a film that I hate, but I don't really get that much enjoyment out of it, and the enjoyment that I do get out of it, more specifically that third act, it's kind of too little too late, honestly. I'm going to give Mission Impossible 2 a C. So stay tuned for my next review where I talk about Mission Impossible 3. I might have an interesting take on that one. Certainly better reception than Mission Impossible 2, but I might think it's underrated. At least that's what I remember out of this film. It's a bit better than a lot of people say it is. Guys, if you like what you're seeing, make sure to subscribe, hit the bell for notifications for the rest of the Mission Impossible series. What are your thoughts on Mission Impossible 2? Are there some of you that actually like this movie, that think I might be a bit too harsh with this one? Whatever you think, leave it down below in the comment section as always, and I'll see you later.